Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Let's also thank Katie Henderson. She put everything together today. Thank you for that. Well, Aaron, great job. Toby, great job. A couple of questions. Anybody has one off the floor can start with that. Otherwise, we had some that came in ahead of time.
Will we receive a copy of the first slides as well
Can't
for
hear
the
it.
first presentation?
Yes, they're on.
Is it okay to
Yep.
send that out?
Sure.
Yep,
Yep.
absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Assuming that I have your email address, if you,
You will.
if you've
You
got
do.
the
You
notes,
have
yes,
Debbie's,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
I have a question.
Jan.
We talked to an insurance broker yesterday that told us that just in the last week, the IRS has interpreted a test regulations that our clients are responsible for the tax. Said it's very, very new.
That your clients are responsible for the temps? No, that's what we were just talking about. I mean, there's nothing in any of the IRS guidance that has suggested that they are not going to consider us the common law employer. And that's who's responsible for the Affordable Care Act provisions, is the common law employer.
Broker might be confusing staffing versus PEO, or there's a lot of stuff bubbles up out there, and they just don't understand the difference.
George.
I have a general question. It has to do with underwriting. Let's say there's two kinds of staffing companies. There's professionals, that's about 15% of the total, and then there's or traditional, is that what it is? Non-exempt, blue collar, white collar. As an underwriter, I'm not concerned with most of the professionals because they're on long-term assignments. They're highly paid people. They're making $25-30 an hour. They go on long-term assignments. No problem with me as a staffing company because I can provide them health insurance. But as an underwriter, I'm scared to death of these other guys because they've got low-paid people. They're never going to have high participation. They're going to be in and out. I don't want to cover them. Well, let me just give you a situation that the way I see it, and I don't think that's a risk for you. Those 85% staffing companies, independents around here, God knows how many staff members they have. But let's say there's 40 million around the country. 2 million, 1 million, I don't know. They're your standard type people that you cover in a normal group insurance plan. They're salaried people, they're reasonably paid. So we're worried about these temps. Well, I got a question for you. Why are you worried about the temps? You're talking about non-exempt level, blue collar, white collar people. We've had health insurance plans over the years. This one, that one, the other one. It doesn't matter what you've got. They're not going to take it. You give me a health insurance policy for my traditional company, and I'd be willing to put money up against this, and I suspect others in the room would too. You give me a plan, covers my staff, it's available for my temps. They're going to have to pay a certain employee portion. You ain't going to have any of it covered. They're going to all opt out.
Except for the sick ones. Because they could pay a couple $100 a month, but bring out $250,000, and then you...
Not our sick ones, because they're going to go down and get Medicaid. They're not going to pay anything for this thing.
It's just the way the health insurance underwriters have seen it over time.
I
The
understand.
sick ones will gravitate, you need to convince enough of those healthy ones with a big fat employer contribution and all
I
that.
understand it. I used to be in labor relations. I had to deal with underwriters. They're idiots. But if I were chief executive of an insurance company, and I could take a few underwriters and beat their heads together and say, wait a minute, let's look at logic, let's look at profit. It's a good bet.
But when you look at the low participation, I mean, say you got 10% of them to enroll or whatever. The 10% number was $168,000 per person that the insurance company would be paying out in claims out of their
It
bank.
might be 1/10 of 1%. It ain't going to be anywhere near 10%.
It's just, it breaks the math for the insurance companies, but I know what you mean. It would be great, and I think it would take a board level decision for an insurance company to say, because the underwriters are not going to stick their neck out. If they do this, they get $1 million claim, and they've only collected $100,000. They're out $900,000 for that group. They're fired. If they do that too many times, they're fired. It would take a board level decision to say, underwriters, we're not going to hold you accountable if these things lose money. Let's just wing it and give it a shot. And if one does it, maybe others will follow, because the insurance companies tend to have that herd mentality. If a big name did it, then maybe another one might do it or whatever. But right
in the
now,
meantime, whoever did it, I wish I had an insurance background and were younger, because I'd love to set up a company to do this, just for temporary service. And that simply is that they're not, you say they're sick, we're talking about people that make $12, $14, $15 an hour. They qualify for every kind of Medicaid situation you can run into. They are not going to take anything if they have to pay $20 a week. It just ain't going to happen. It's off the top. So the only thing you've done is you've locked up every staff employee of every independent temporary company in whatever your market area is. You've got no competition. And you might have an occasional blue collar, temp slip in there, FTE, and okay, he's sick, have to pay for him and everything. It's not going to even start to drag away from the profit that you'll be making. I wish the hell I could start a company like that. I just don't know anything about insurance.
Yeah, Aaron, you may have covered this, going back to the exchanges. Now, how is that being funded? I may have missed that. Where's those monies coming from?
Part of it is through these taxes. These, coming after the employers for some, and then I'm sure as the costs escalate, the taxes are going to escalate. So
Right.
is the price of health insurance. It's all on a freight train path, unfortunately.
That's my concern, given our fiscal instability of our, whether it's local, county, state, or federal governments. You hear the word taxes or excise taxes, very few entities are soluble. And, I just was a little concerned of how those exchanges are going to be funded, if they're going to be real quick upside down, like maybe Social Security or some of the other social programs.
Yeah, I sense that they might be. It's
Yeah.
literally, they didn't use a lot, in my mind, they didn't use very good math or psychology behind how they're doing this whole health reform. I mean, if you're going to tell somebody you've got to go buy a plan through the exchange, we'll help subsidize it, but this person's living paycheck to paycheck. They might not even have a checkbook. They don't have a couple $100 a month or $100 a month, whatever it is. And if they do nothing, which is the easiest thing to do nothing. Look at it, whatever, go back to work, and because they need that $100 a month for groceries or whatever. Then what happens? Well, next April, over a year later, when they get the refund check in the mail, maybe there's a $95 taken out of it. There's no real pain, versus going and actually writing a check every month or having to come out of for the cost of that cover. So the way that whole thing is broken, I think. And to entice those young healthies in, and then the 3-to-1 rate compression, which means you're going to have to charge the young healthy people more to offset the sicker one, even fewer of the young healthies. So I tend to agree. There's going to be adverse selection. It's going to raise the rate.
There's two other things here. The first thing is the Medicaid expansion plan, which was the linchpin of this, one of the linchpins of this program, was to double the group that could be eligible for Medicaid in the states. And the federal government would pay states back dollar for dollar for the first 2 years. And then after that, they go down to 90%. And that's one of the things that the Supreme Court overturned in the decision because it was basically coercion. They were blackmailing the states. And now you've had all these states that won't take the expansion because they're afraid the federal government's going to change their mind. And then they're going to be stuck and they're not going to be able to do anything.
And that was going to be my question to you. Is the state of South Carolina making the right decision by choosing not to participate in the Medicaid and federal monies?
Well, I mean, it's not for you as an employer in one sense, because Medicaid folks aren't eligible to go to the exchange, and you're not going to be responsible for them as an employer if you offer any kind of coverage. So you're now going to have more people that you could potentially have to cover. But, it depends on if you feel that it's, what happens if the government goes back in 3 years and changes something, and all of a sudden now it's down to 80% or 75%. Yes.
Thank
So do
you.
you have a sense of how the largest staffing companies in the country are going to handle are they going to put a surcharge on all invoices, Kelly, Manpower, Adecco?
I think that, of course, we can't talk about those in official meetings because it violates antitrust law.
Can't hear you.
We're not supposed to. We're violating.
Even better.
I mumbled on purpose. So we asked.
Do I need to turn off the camera?
Oh yeah, no, right on. Let's talk about price.
Let me zoom in on that one then.
I'm not asking you really,
Yeah,
what's
no,
the sense?
I just sense that,
YouTube
first of all, the really big folks are taking a serious look at self-insuring. okay? Because they feel like they're the ones that are gonna be able to do it and have a chance of doing it. And they determine from a cost, especially since the excise tax comes into play, they're doing some calculations and they think it's worth, going down that path. If not, if they're talking about, most people that we've talked to are looking to spread the cost over all of their employees, whether or not there's a charge for health insurance or not, because you can break it down to a real, almost like 10, 11 cents an hour if you spread it across your entire workforce. And you can get that even lower if you start, maybe you guys take a little bit of it and the other part of it comes out in lower increases in wages over the years, which everybody knew was going to be the potential. But as far as a flat, like a sales tax line item, no. Like most people are going to try to blend it over everybody because it's a much more manageable number. Okay. Yes.
Hi, this is strictly personal, and you may have already answered it, and I was a little bit late. When you're speaking about a minimum or maximum number of 50 employees, are you speaking of 50 employees on the books at one time, or 50 employees that you get W-2s?
It's a full-time equivalent count, so it's going to be determined by the number of hours. I mean, the easiest way to do it, except you get a little bit skewed, is you just take all the hours that anybody worked for you, and you divide it by 1560. Now the problem there is that if you got people that are working 40 hours for you that are full-time, you're basically throwing extra hours into the pot, which is why we break it down the way we do. But it's not going to be just a W-2 count, because my understanding is you issue W-2 counts for basically everybody, and it's an hourly determination that's going to trigger it, which again is why it's so easy for most staffing firms to fly by that 50 full-time equivalent number.
So on your variable hours, Steph, there you mentioned 3 months or less. That 90 days in our industry, a lot of people look for those for 13 weeks at a time. So it's
if you're talking about a basic 13-month assignment or 13-week assignment, you're gonna have a hard time convincing me that that doesn't meet the definition of variable hour. I mean, again, because I think 4 and 5 months assignments, especially when you're talking about maybe more than 3 but less than 4, 3.5 months, that's a pretty short-term assignment in our world. And that seems to be the way that they're coming out on that as well. Yes, ma'am.
Will we be able to satisfy our employer obligations to provide insurance if we choose to play under the ACA with private exchanges that offer individual plans, as long as they were contributing a portion so it's affordable?
I don't believe so.
No, it has to be an employer group.
Has to be an employer group plan.
Yeah.
We can't hear this.
The question was, would you be able to satisfy your employer requirement if you offered individual coverage through a private exchange to your employees, even if you gave part of the premium? And the answer is no, because it has to be an employer group plan, which is why you want to be careful when you hear about some plans that say that they maybe they will meet that plan, but you've got to be careful, because an individual plan will be an automatic disclaimer and disqualify you from that. Yes.
Are you familiar with the different safe harbors and what we can deduct, whether it's a base rate safe harbor, base pay rate safe harbor?
I'm not for your description, but can you?
There's 3 different ways that we can offer coverage. One is not to exceed 9.5% of the employee's W-2.
That's their employee share has to be less than 9.5% of their salary.
Then there's a base pay rate safe harbor that says we can charge 9.5% of the lowest base pay rate offered, and we charge that across the board.
Well, sure. I think that's basically just saying that if you take the lowest paid employee and you structure a plan that that person, their share would be under 9.5%, then you automatically now know that everybody else will be fine. And that if somebody happens to come in and they drop underneath that, or they go to the exchange and the exchange sees something and it turns out that they're falling underneath the 9.5%, that you have a safe harbor. And the other safe harbor that they deal with is, the actual statute says that it's 9.5% of family income, okay? And the problem that all employers have with that is nobody knows what a family's income is unless you've got, you know, two people that work together, that live together. How many times does that happen? Not very often. So the safe harbor was created where it wasn't even really a safe harbor, it was more a concession on the employer's part, where we base it on the employee's wages. Now, as an employer, if you've got somebody who you run through the numbers and their share is 10%, okay, and you know that their husband works, now you can elect by sending them to the exchange, because the exchange will go through the whole rigmarole, and the exchange can then run the numbers and say, aha, you may be 10% of your income, but when you take in your spouse's income, now it's down to 4%, and you're not eligible for a subsidy.
It's a weird dynamic in that they had to make it workable for the employers, so they had to base it just on employee-only pay, 9%, 9.5%. But when that employee, if they're in real life, they have a family of 4, they go to the exchange, and the family rate costs them $1,000 a month or whatever, then it really might not be affordable.
There was somebody in our coalition who, when this first came out, and she had had a baby, and she stopped working for 3